He replaced me in my own house. That's right, baby. My ex-husband brought his new wife right into the home we built together. And when I say our home, I mean every wall, every nail, every dollar came from years of my sweat and sacrifice. Now listen, I'm not a bitter woman by nature. I've lived long enough to know people change, feelings fade. But what he did, that wasn't just moving on. It was cruelty dressed up like love. I remember standing on that porch, the one I painted yellow every spring. My hands were trembling so bad I had to hold on to the railing. Through the front window, I saw them, him and her, laughing in my kitchen. My kitchen. The one where I'd made cornbread and greens every Sunday for 30 years. He looked so settled, like I'd never existed, and that broke something inside me. Now you gotta understand how we got there. We'd been married almost 4 decades. 40 years of ups and downs, raising kids, paying bills, going through sickness and joy, and all that comes with building a life together. I stood by that man when he had nothing but a busted truck and a dream. When he got laid off from the plant, I took double shifts at the diner. My feet would swell up so bad I'd soak them in salt water before bed. But I kept us afloat. I believed in him, because that's what wives do, right? Then one day, it all started to shift. He began staying out late, saying he was helping a church friend with her business. Mm-hmm. Funny thing, that friend started calling our house, and when I picked up, she'd hang up. You ever get that feeling in your gut when something's off? I felt it every time he left the driveway, but I told myself, don't be paranoid. Trust your man. Lord, I wish I hadn't. One Sunday, I went to church alone. He said he wasn't feeling well. When I came back, I found a perfume bottle sitting on the bathroom counter. Something floral, strong, not the kind I wear. And the bedspread was different. That man had changed the sheets while I was praising the Lord. I just sat on the edge of that bed, staring at the wall. My chest hurt so bad I thought I might faint. But I didn't say a word that night. I kept quiet and watched, because sometimes silence tells you more than any argument could. 3 weeks later, he packed his bag. Didn't even look me in the eye. Just said, "It's not working anymore, Mabel." Mabel, that's my name, by the way. He walked out that door and didn't call for months. Then out of nowhere, I get a letter from the bank with his name and her name listed on my mortgage. Tell me, baby, would you have lost your mind right then? Because I almost did. Now listen. When I saw that letter from the bank, my knees almost gave out. I had to sit right there on the kitchen floor, holding that paper in both hands. It said primary owner, Harold Jameson. That's him. And co-owner, Denise Parker. Denise, the church friend. My heart dropped. I'd been paying that mortgage for years. I refinanced twice to help our son through college, and now my name was nowhere to be found. You still with me, baby? Because this part hurts the most. I drove straight down to the bank in my old Buick, wearing my house shoes and a scarf over my head. I didn't care how I looked. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely sign in. The young man at the counter looked at me, all polite, and said, "Ma'am, do you have an appointment with Mr. Harold Jameson?" I said, "No, baby, I'm here to talk about my house, the one y'all just gave to another woman." He blinked like he didn't understand. I handed him the paper, and he disappeared into the back. 5 minutes later, he came back with that look. You know the one people give when they're scared to tell you something ugly. He said, "Ma'am, the title was changed 2 months ago. Looks like both parties signed." I said, "Both parties? Who signed for me?" He hesitated. "It shows your name, but, looks like it was processed electronically." That's when I felt it. That hot rush in my chest, like my heart caught fire. That man forged my signature. My own husband. I walked out of that bank and sat in my car for an hour. Just sat there, staring at the steering wheel. I couldn't even cry. It was like my body shut down. Now let me tell you something. There's a kind of silence that only comes when you've been betrayed by somebody you trusted with your soul. That silence isn't empty. It's heavy. It's got a sound to it, like your heartbeat echoing in your ears. When I finally started the car, I didn't drive home. I went to my sister Darlene's house. She opened the door, took one look at me, and said, Mabel, what happened? You look like you seen a ghost. I just handed her the letter. Didn't even speak. She read it slow, her lips moving, and when she got to the bottom, she gasped. He put her name on your house? I nodded. Couldn't even get the words out. She sat me down at her kitchen table, poured me some sweet tea, and said, Girl, you better not let this slide. You call a lawyer first thing in the morning. But you know what I said? No, Darlene, not yet. I need to see it for myself first. And Lord help me, that's exactly what I did. The next morning, I drove to my house, the one I paid for, prayed for, cleaned every Saturday. And what I saw through that front window, it near about broke me in two. They were in there, laughing, eating breakfast at my table. My husband, his new wife, sitting where I used to sit. Tell me, baby, what would you have done if you were me? I froze right there in the driveway. Didn't even get out the car. My fingers were gripping the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles turned white. Through that window, I could see her moving around my kitchen, wearing one of my aprons. That old yellow one with the little embroidered flowers on the pocket. My mama gave me that for Christmas, back in '98. And there she was, flipping pancakes in it, like she'd earned the right to. I swear, my chest got so tight I couldn't breathe. I cracked the car window just to get air. You ever been so angry you start trembling? That was me. Right there on Maple Street, trembling in broad daylight, like a fool. Then Harold walked in, holding a mug. He kissed her cheek, just casual, like life was sweet. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run up those steps, bang on that door, and tell the both of them exactly what I thought. But instead, I just sat there, silent, because sometimes silence cuts deeper than shouting ever could. Now hear me out. I wasn't about to let my rage make me stupid. I learned a long time ago that patience can be a weapon too. So I waited. I watched them through that window for a good 10 minutes, memorizing everything. Then I started my car and drove straight to the courthouse. The lady at the desk looked tired, like she'd seen 1,000 broken hearts that week. I told her I needed copies of any property transfers under my name. She pulled it up, typed a few things, and said softly, Yes, ma'am. Looks like it was signed digitally 2 months ago. Can I see that signature? I asked. She turned the screen around, and baby, when I saw it, I almost laughed. That wasn't my handwriting. Not even close. He forged it, clear as day. I said, Print that out for me, please. And she did. I folded it neat and tucked it right into my purse like it was gold. Later that night, I sat on Darlene's porch with the papers spread out on my lap. The crickets were loud, and the air smelled like rain. She came outside, wrapped her robe tighter, and said, So what's your next move, sis? I looked at her and said, I ain't sure yet, but I'm not walking away empty-handed, not after everything I built. She smiled a little, shook her head. You always did have fight in you. I said, Oh, I got fight, but I got wisdom now too. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid there thinking about every sacrifice I'd made for that man, every bill I'd paid, every meal I'd cooked, every time I told him, We'll make it through. And for what? So he could give our house to some woman he met at church? Mm-hmm. Not this time. Because that's when I decided. If he could play dirty, I could play smart. And baby, believe me when I say this, what I did next changed everything. That night, I didn't close my eyes once. Every time I tried, I'd see them, sitting in my kitchen, laughing like they built that life themselves. By sunrise, my mind was made up. Now listen, baby. When you've been through enough storms, you learn to stop running for shelter. You learn to build your own roof. And that morning, I decided to build mine out of strategy. First thing I did was pull out my old files. I kept every receipt, every bill, every mortgage payment slip since the day we bought that house. I spread them all across Darlene's dining table. Looked like a paper hurricane. When she came in and saw it, she said, Lord have mercy. Mabel, you planning to sue him or start a museum? I said, maybe both. She laughed, but I wasn't joking. I found the deed copy with my maiden name still on it, from the original purchase. My name, in ink. That was proof right there that I'd been the rightful co-owner. Next, I called a lawyer, a woman named Miss Carter. Older lady, tough voice, the kind that don't waste words. When she picked up, I said, "Ma'am, my husband of 40 years forged my signature and moved another woman into our house." There was a pause. Then she said, "Come in today. Bring everything you've got." So I did. I sat in her office in my blue cardigan, clutching that folder like it was my lifeline. She flipped through the papers, eyes sharp behind those glasses. After a while, she said, "It's this forgery and property fraud. He's in deep trouble if we can prove this." I said, "Prove it. Oh, I plan to do more than that." She smirked a little. "You've got fight in you, Miss Mabel. I like that." I told her I may be old, but I'm not blind. I see what he did, and I'm not letting him win. She leaned forward and said quietly, "Then let's make sure you don't just win, but walk away standing tall." Now, let me tell you something. I left that office feeling lighter than I had in months. Not happy, no, but powerful, like I had my name back. That evening, I went back to Darlene's, sat out on the porch again, and watched the sunset. The light hit the trees just right, and for a second, I remembered what peace felt like. But that peace didn't last long, because 2 days later, I got a knock on Darlene's door. I opened it, and there he was, Harold, standing there with that same calm face, like he hadn't turned my world upside down. He said, "Mabel, we need to talk." And I said, "Oh, we sure do." But baby, what came out of his mouth next wasn't an apology. It was a warning. He stood there on Darlene's porch like he owned the place, hands in his pockets, eyes darting everywhere except at me. That's how guilty men look, baby. Can't hold your gaze for more than 2 seconds. I crossed my arms. "What do you want, Harold?" He sighed, like he was the one who had been wronged. "Mabel," he said, "I didn't come here to fight. I just need you to stop causing problems." I raised an eyebrow. "Problems? You mean asking the bank why my name disappeared off the house I paid for?" He looked around, voice dropping low. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Denise and I are trying to start fresh. You don't need that place anymore. You've got Darlene." Lord, I almost laughed right in his face. I said, "You really think I'd just hand over my home like it's an old coat you don't want anymore?" He took a step closer, voice tight. "You don't understand, Mabel. If you drag this into court, it's going to get ugly. For everybody. ... I stared at him. "You threatening me, Harold?" He shook his head, tried to smile. "No, I'm just saying, maybe it's time to let the past go." Let the past go? That man had turned my home into his honeymoon suite, and now wanted me to stay quiet? I took one slow step toward him, close enough to smell that same aftershave I used to buy him every Christmas. I said, "Harold Jameson, you walked out on me, forged my name, and moved a stranger into my kitchen. You don't get to tell me when to let go." He flinched, just a little. Then he looked down at the floorboards and muttered, "You're not going to win this." I said, "Oh, baby, I already am." Then I shut that door right in his face. My sister came running from the back, asking what happened. I told her, "He came here to scare me quiet." She said, "You ain't scared, are you?" I said, "Not anymore. But I'll be honest with you. Once she went to bed, I sat there alone at the kitchen table, and that confidence started to crack. Because that man had power. He had connections. And for the first time, I realized this fight wasn't going to be quick. Still, I wasn't backing down. I called Miss Carter the next morning and told her everything he said. She didn't even pause. She said, "We'll file a freeze order on the property. That way, he can't sell or refinance until the investigation's done." And just like that, the first crack showed up in Harold's shiny new world. A week later, I heard through a neighbor that his new wife wasn't too happy. Apparently, the bank had locked the account tied to the house. No funds, no credit, nothing. Sometimes karma don't take years, baby. Sometimes it just needs a good lawyer and a fed-up woman with receipts. But little did I know, that freeze was just the beginning. Because when Harold realized what I'd done, he decided to play dirty. Real dirty. You ever notice how, when people can't beat you fair, they start whispering behind your back? That's exactly what Harold did next. It started small. Neighbors who used to wave stopped waving. And church folk, The same ones who'd hugged me every Sunday started avoiding eye contact. I knew something was off. Then one morning, Darlene came into the kitchen holding her phone, eyes wide. "Mabel," she said, "you might want to see this." She handed it to me, and there it was, a Facebook post. Harold had written some long story about how I'd lost touch with reality, how I was trying to ruin his life because I couldn't move on. He even wrote that he'd let me keep the house, but I'd gone behind his back out of spite. I could barely finish reading. My throat burned. My hands were shaking. And the worst part, some folks were believing him. I told Darlene, "He's trying to make me look crazy." She said, "That's what manipulators do, sis. They play the victim. Now listen, baby. When someone tries to destroy your name, it's not just words. It's war. And I'd been through too much in life to let a man rewrite my story. So I stayed quiet again, didn't clap back online, didn't post a thing. Instead, I doubled down with Miss Carter. We gathered every bit of proof, bank logs, text messages, even the old photo of us standing in front of the house the day we bought it. My name was right there on the closing sign. Ms. Carter said, "This case is solid. Once the bank confirms the digital forgery, he's done." But while we waited, Harold wasn't finished. He called our son, our only boy, and fed him the same lies. Told him I was making a mess out of spite. 2 days later, my phone rang. "Hey, Ma," he said, voice distant. "Dad says you're trying to take the house out of revenge. That true?" That one stung deep. I said, "Baby, your mama's just trying to keep what she earned. You think I'd fight this hard if it wasn't mine?" He went quiet for a while, then said, "I don't want to take sides, Ma." I whispered, "I get it, but one day you'll see the truth." When we hung up, I just sat there staring at the wall, my chest heavy, my eyes wet. You ever cry so quiet you can hear the sound of your own breathing? That kind of crying that don't make noise, but it aches all the same? That was me that night. Darlene came out from her room, wrapped her arms around me, and said, "Let him talk, Mabel. The truth don't need defending. It just needs time." And she was right, because 3 weeks later I got a call from Miss Carter's office. She said, "You might want to sit down for this." I said, "What's wrong?" She smiled through the phone. "Nothing wrong. The bank just confirmed your signature was forged. We got him, Miss Mabel." I dropped to my knees right there in that living room. Not out of victory, out of relief. But what came next? Oh, baby, it wasn't justice yet. It was payback, and it came knocking louder than Harold ever expected. When that call came through, I swear my whole body went weak. 40 years of marriage, and it ended with a bank investigator confirming what I already knew. He'd forged my name. I sat on the edge of Darlene's couch, papers spread out in my lap, eyes blurry from tears. Not just sadness, relief, anger, pride, all rolled into one heavy breath. Darlene came rushing in when she heard me crying. "Mabel, what happened? You all right?" I held up the letter. "They confirmed it, sis. That man forged my signature. It's official." She let out a low whistle. "Well, Lord have mercy, he's cooked." I laughed through my tears. "Oh, he don't even know the oven's preheated yet." Now listen, baby. Sometimes God don't move fast, but when he does, he moves right on time. The lawyer told me we could reclaim ownership and demand compensation, so we filed the papers. A few days later, the court sent Harold a notice. He must have thought it was just another bill, because I heard from a neighbor that when he opened it, he went pale as a ghost. The next afternoon, my phone rang. It was him. "Mabel, what is this?" he said, voice shaky. "You trying to ruin me?" I said, calm as ever, "No, Harold. I'm just correcting a mistake." He shouted, "You can't do this. You'll leave me with nothing." I said, "Funny. That's exactly what you left me with." Then I hung up. You understand, right? That wasn't anger. That was closure. Ms. Carter called the next week with good news. "Mabel, since he committed fraud, the court's siding with you. You can force the sale or take full ownership." I said, "Can I do both?" She laughed. "You can cash him out, honey, and you'd be smart to." That night, I sat out on the porch again. The crickets were singing, and the air smelled like rain. I looked up at the sky and whispered, Lord, thank you. I ain't asking for revenge. I just want my peace back. But baby, peace sometimes looks a lot like justice wearing heels. 2 months later, the papers came through. The house was officially in my name again. And guess what I did? I sold it. Every brick, every nail, every memory, gone. I took that money, cashed it out clean, and walked away with my head high. Now here's the part that'll make your jaw drop. Harold didn't know the house had sold until the movers showed up. He called me in a panic, yelling, What's happening? I said, You and Denise better pack fast, baby. New owners move in Monday. He went silent. Then he said, Mabel, where are we supposed to go? I took a deep breath and said, Wherever you told me to go when you threw me out. And I hung up. They were out by Sunday. No house, no savings, no plan. I didn't have to hurt him, baby. He did that all by himself. But trust me, karma wasn't finished with them yet. The day the movers came, I sat in my car down the street. Didn't want to see it up close, not because I felt bad, but because I'd already said my goodbye to that house. I watched from a distance as Harold stood on the porch, pacing back and forth, phone glued to his ear. Denise was beside him, crying, trying to hold a lamp like it would save her life. Boxes everywhere. Furniture half wrapped in old blankets. They looked lost. Now listen, baby, I didn't smile. Not once, because even when you've been wronged, watching someone fall still stings a little, especially when you used to love them. But what I did feel was finality, like a door finally closing that should have been locked a long time ago. I turned the key, started my car, and drove away. Didn't even look back. That evening, I met Darlene at the diner down by Main Street. She slid into the booth, grinning like she already knew. You did it, didn't you? I took a sip of my coffee. House sold, check cleared, I'm done. She leaned back. So what now? You gonna buy another place? I smiled. Nope, I think I'm gonna travel a bit. See places I never got to when I was busy taking care of everyone else. She chuckled. That's the spirit. Start living for you now. We sat there for a long time, eating pie and laughing about old times. But somewhere between the laughter, my chest got heavy again. Because no matter how strong you are, betrayal leaves a scar. It don't matter if you win the case, sell the house, or walk away. That pain follows you, quiet as a shadow. Later that night, I drove past the house one last time. The porch light was off, the windows dark, empty. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel broken. I just felt done. But here's the funny thing about karma, baby. It don't always stop where you expect it to. About 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my sister's living room when the evening news came on. Reporters said there'd been a small electrical fire in a house over on Maple Street. No one hurt, but the damage was bad. Guess which house it was? That house. My old house. Darlene looked at me, eyes wide. You think that's... I cut her off. No, that's between them and the Lord. And I meant that, because by then, I'd already moved on inside my heart. See, sometimes the real revenge isn't watching someone fall. It's watching yourself rise without them. And baby, I was finally rising. You know, baby, people always talk about starting over like it's some grand adventure. But let me tell you, starting over at 60 ain't easy. It's quiet. It's lonely. It's a whole lot of sitting with memories you wish would just hush for a while. Still, I was determined. After the sale cleared, I packed up what little I had left. My photo albums, my mother's old quilt, and the coffee mug that said, Bless this mess. That was it. I rented a small place on the edge of town. 1 bedroom, creaky floors, and a porch swing that squeaked when you rocked too hard. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Completely mine. Every morning, I'd make a cup of coffee and sit out there watching the sunrise. No shouting, no tension. Just birds, wind, and me. And for the first time in a long while, I felt peace creeping back in like sunlight through the blinds. Now listen, healing don't come easy, especially when betrayal runs deep. Some mornings, I'd wake up reaching for Harold's side of the bed, forgetting it was empty. Other days, I'd find myself smiling at a memory before remembering the ending. That's how grief works. It sneaks up and taps you on the shoulder when you least expect it. One afternoon, Darlene came by with a big grin on her face. "Mabel, you need to stop sitting on this porch all day. I signed us up for something." I frowned. "What kind of something?" She said, "Line dancing class down at the community center." I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my lemonade. "Darlene, my knees barely work." She winked. "You'll fit right in." That first night at the class, I felt awkward, like a teenager again. But the music was good. Old Motown hits, real toe tappers, and before long, I was moving. Laughing even. Not thinking about Harold. Not thinking about Denise. Just moving. And it felt good, baby. Real good. A few folks there recognized me, and one of them whispered, "Didn't your husband run off with that woman?" I smiled and said, "He sure did, but I ran off with my piece." They laughed, and so did I, because that was the first time I'd ever said it out loud, and meant it. Now don't get me wrong, some nights were still rough. I'd sit by the window, looking out at the moon, wondering if Harold was sleeping on some friend's couch. But then I'd shake my head and whisper, "He made his bed, Lord. Let him lie in it." And I'd go to sleep, peacefully. But baby, life has a funny way of circling back when you least expect it. Because just when I thought I'd closed that chapter for good, Harold found a way to walk right back into my life. It was a Saturday morning, sunny, peaceful, the kind where you water your porch plants and let the radio hum in the background. I was humming along to an old Aretha Franklin song when I heard a knock at my door. Now listen, baby. You ever get that strange chill before you even see who it is? Like your spirit knows before your eyes do? That's how it felt. I opened the door, and there he was. Harold, but not the Harold I remembered. This man looked worn down. Eyes sunken, clothes wrinkled, hair gone gray around the edges. He was holding his hat in both hands, like a little boy waiting to be scolded. "Mabel," he said softly, "can I come in?" I didn't move, just stared at him. Part of me wanted to slam the door, but another part, the softer part, remembered the years, the children, the good days that used to exist before everything soured. So I sighed and said, "You can stand right there and talk. I don't bite." He nodded slowly, eyes glancing down. "I don't deserve to even be here, I know, but I don't got nowhere else to go." I folded my arms. "What happened to your new wife?" He swallowed hard. "She left, took what little money we had left, and ran off with some man from her job." I blinked, trying not to show emotion. I said quietly. "Karma sure don't need directions, does it?" He gave a weak smile. Guess I had that coming. Silence sat heavy between us. The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Finally, he said, "I messed up, Mabel. I was stupid. Thought I was chasing happiness, but all I found was emptiness." I looked him square in the eye. "You didn't just mess up, Harold. You destroyed what you already had, trying to find something shiny. That's not stupid. That's selfish." He nodded, tears welling up. "You're right. I ain't got no excuses. Now hear me out, baby." In that moment, something in me shifted. The anger, the bitterness, it all started to melt just a little. Not because I forgave him right there, but because I saw how small he'd become under his own choices. I said, "Harold, I don't hate you, but I don't owe you either. Not a roof, not forgiveness, not comfort. That's between you and God." He lowered his head. "I understand." Then he turned to walk away, slow and quiet, and I watched him go. No satisfaction, no victory, just peace. Because that's when I finally realized something. Revenge might feel good for a minute, but letting go, that's freedom that lasts. He disappeared down that road, and I never saw him again. Not once. But a few months later, I got a letter in the mail with his name on it. And baby, what was inside that envelope made my hands tremble all over again. That letter came on a Thursday morning. I remember because it was raining. The kind of soft drizzle that makes the world quiet. I found it sitting in my mailbox, all wrinkled at the edges, the ink from his name slightly smudged. For a moment, I just stared at it. My stomach twisted up like it was warning me. Don't open that, Mabel. Don't let him back in your peace. But curiosity, baby, it's a tricky thing. It'll make you touch a wound you already healed, just to see if it still hurts. So I brought that letter inside, sat at my little kitchen table, and opened it slow. The paper was cheap hotel stationery, and the handwriting? Shaky, uneven. Not the proud man I once knew. It started simple. Mabel, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone by now. I've been sick for a while, and truth is, I didn't have the heart to tell anyone, not even our son. I didn't want pity. I just wanted peace. I stopped right there. My throat tightened, and my eyes burned. Gone? I read on. I lost everything after you left. The house, the money, my pride. But the hardest thing to lose was the chance to say I'm sorry face to face. You didn't deserve what I did. You were my anchor, and I let go. I see that now. My tears hit the paper and made the ink bleed. I wiped them away and kept reading. I left a small envelope with Miss Carter for you. It's nothing big, just something I wanted you to have. Maybe it'll help you start fresh, the way I should have helped you years ago. If you can find it in your heart to forgive me, I'll be grateful, even from wherever I end up. Love always, Harold. When I finished, I couldn't breathe for a moment. I just sat there, the letter trembling in my hands, the rain still tapping on the window like it was echoing my heartbeat. You ever feel two things at once? Heartbreak and peace? That's what that moment felt like. I was angry he waited until the end to do right. But part of me was thankful he finally did. The next morning, I went to Miss Carter's office. She smiled soft when she saw me. I was wondering when you'd come. He left this for you. She handed me a brown envelope, thick, sealed with my name written on it in a shaky handwriting. I opened it, expecting a few words, maybe an old photo, but inside was a check. Enough to buy a small house outright. I gasped. Lord have mercy, Miss Carter said. He sold some land he'd inherited, told me he wanted to make things right before it was too late. I just sat there, staring at that check through blurry eyes. For once, I didn't feel revenge. I didn't feel triumph. I just whispered, "Thank you, Harold. I forgive you." And I meant it, baby. Right then and there, I meant it. Because sometimes the closure we pray for don't come through apologies or tears. It comes through the quiet understanding that the story's finally over. But what I did with that money, that's another story altogether. That check sat on my kitchen table for 3 whole days. Every morning I'd look at it, sip my coffee, and ask myself, what am I supposed to do with this, Lord? It wasn't about the money. It was about the meaning. That man had broken me, and now, in death, he was trying to piece me back together. Darlene came over on the 4th day, spotted the envelope, and said, "Mabel, please tell me that ain't what I think it is." I nodded. "It's from Harold. He left it before he passed." She pulled out a chair and sat. "So what are you going to do with it?" I sighed. "I don't know yet, but I'm not wasting it. I'm too old for fancy cars and nonsense. I want it to mean something." She smiled. "Then you already know what to do." That night I sat by the window and thought back over my whole life. The years of working double shifts, the house I lost, the house I sold, the man I forgave. And somewhere in the middle of that quiet, an idea started forming. Next morning, I drove down to a part of town most folks forget about. Old houses, cracked sidewalks, overgrown yards. That's where I saw it. A run-down little building with a faded sign that said Community Center closed. I parked, got out, and walked around. Inside, it smelled like dust and memory. But I could see it clear as day, what it could be. A place for older folks like me, who'd been left behind, who needed somewhere to gather, laugh, talk, feel seen again, a place to start over without shame. So I did it. I used that check to buy the building outright. Got a small grant from the city to help fix it up. Painted the walls a warm cream color. Hung pictures of smiling faces. Real people, not models. and named it the Second Chance Center. When Darlene saw the sign go up, she cried, "Mabel, that's beautiful." I said, "I figured if Harold's last act was giving me a chance to start again, I'd use it to help others do the same." Now, baby, let me tell you, that place came alive fast. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we had folks coming in to play cards, share stories, learn recipes, even dance a little when the music hit just right. One lady told me, "I ain't laughed this much in years." Another said, "You make it feel like home." And in those moments, I realized something powerful. Sometimes the best revenge isn't payback, it's purpose. That money, that betrayal, that pain, all of it turned into something good. I wasn't bitter anymore. I was glooming. And when people asked me how I managed to forgive a man who did me so wrong, I'd smile and say, "Because forgiveness set me free, and look what freedom built." But life still had one more twist waiting for me, baby. Because a few months after the center opened, someone walked through those doors I never thought I'd see again. It was a warm Thursday afternoon. The center smelled like fresh coffee and cinnamon muffins. Miss Ruby had just baked a batch for the folks coming in. Music was playing low, people were laughing, and I was wiping down one of the tables when the front door creaked open. I didn't look up at first. Then I heard a voice I hadn't heard in nearly a year. "Hey, Ma!" My hand froze mid-wipe. That voice, deeper now, softer, but still my baby. I turned around slow, and there he was, my son, David, standing in the doorway, holding a small box, eyes full of something between guilt and hope. "David," I whispered, my throat tight. He gave a shy smile. "You gonna hug me, or you still mad at me?" I dropped the cloth and wrapped him up before he could finish. Lord, I held that boy like I was holding on to the past, the pain, and every prayer I ever said for him all at once. We stood there a good minute, neither of us saying a word. Then I pulled back, looked at his face, tired, older, but still my boy. He said, "You look good, Ma. Better than I expected." I laughed through tears. Well, forgiveness is good for the skin. He chuckled, then looked around. "So this is it, huh? The place everyone's been talking about?" I nodded. "This is my Second Chance Center." He walked around slow, touching the tables, looking at the photos on the wall. "It's nice, real nice." After a while, he sat down and said quietly, "I owe you an apology, Ma." I sat across from him. "You don't owe me nothing but honesty." He looked down at his hands. "When Dad told me his side of things, I believed him. I shouldn't have. I just didn't want to think my parents were enemies, you know?" I nodded. "I know, baby. You are stuck in the middle. But truth don't need defending. It just needs time to show itself." He exhaled. "I see that now, and I'm sorry for not calling when everything went down." I reached over, touched his hand. "You called today. That's what matters." He smiled, eyes glistening. "Dad wrote me before he passed. Told me he left you something. Said you deserved it. I think he was trying to make peace." I nodded slowly. "He did, and I accepted it." David's face softened. "I'm proud of you, Ma. You turned pain into purpose." I laughed. "Well, life don't stop just because your heart breaks. You either sit in the ashes or build a fire to keep going." He said, "Then you're a whole bonfire." That made me laugh so hard I nearly cried again. We spent the rest of that day talking. Friends, about old times, his kids, life, faith, and when he left, he hugged me tight and whispered, "Don't disappear again, all right?" I said, "Only if you don't." As I watched him drive off, the evening sun hit the windows just right, casting warm light all over the room. And I thought to myself, this is what healing looks like. But baby, that wasn't the end of my story, because the next person to walk through those doors, I never saw that one coming either. It was about 2 weeks after David's visit. The center was busy that morning. Laughter, gospel music, the shuffle of domino pieces on tables. I was pouring coffee for Miss Ruby when the door creaked open again. I looked up and froze. Standing there in a faded denim jacket, clutching a purse too small for her troubles, was Denise. Yes, that Denise. The woman who had once lived in my house. worn my apron, and cooked breakfast with my husband at my kitchen table. For a second, everything in the room went quiet. At least in my head it did. The clinking cups, the laughter, the music, all of it faded until I could only hear my own heartbeat. She spotted me, froze, then looked down. "Mabel," she said softly, I I didn't know this was your place." My fingers gripped the coffee pot tight. I took a breath. "It's the town's place. I just keep it running." She nodded slow, eyes red around the edges. "I almost didn't come in, but someone told me this was where people go when they've got nowhere else." I set the pot down, wiped my hands, and looked her straight in the eye. "Well," I said, "you came to the right place then." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. She fidgeted with her purse strap, then whispered, "Harold told me you were strong. Said I'd never understand what he lost until it was too late. He was right." That stung a little, hearing his name again. But I stayed still. "What is it you need, Denise?" Her voice cracked. "A place to volunteer. Something to do. Somewhere to feel human again. I've been drifting. Now listen, baby. Old me would have told her to drift right on, out the same door she came through. But new me, I looked at her, really looked. And all I saw was another woman broken by bad choices. So I nodded. "We always got room for helpers. Can you make coffee without burning the pot?" She blinked, surprised. "Yes, ma'am." "Then you're hired. Welcome to the Second Chance Center." Her eyes filled with tears. "You serious?" I smiled, just a little. Everybody deserves a second chance, even the ones who took mine first. The next few weeks, Denise came every Tuesday and Thursday. Quiet, polite, always showing up early and leaving late. We didn't talk much at first, just worked side by side. But one afternoon, she looked at me and said, "You ever think Harold would want this? Us working together?" I said, "Maybe not, but maybe that's why it's right." She nodded slow, tears welling up. "I'm sorry, Mabel, for everything. I know it don't change what happened." I wiped my hands on a towel and said softly, "No, it don't. But saying it matters." And baby, it did. Because that was the day I realized forgiveness ain't a one-time thing. It's a daily decision to stop bleeding from the same wound. From then on, Denise became part of our little family at the center. And funny enough, she was good with people, gentle, patient, always listening. Sometimes I'd catch her humming while she wiped tables, and I'd think, maybe that's what grace looks like. Two women cleaning up the same mess life left behind. You know, baby, I never thought I'd say this, but Denise and I started to get along. Not best friends, Lord no, but peaceful. The kind of peace that comes when you stop expecting apologies to fix the past. Every Tuesday morning, she'd be there before I even opened the doors, wiping down tables, brewing coffee, humming those soft little church songs that used to fill my kitchen years ago. Funny how life circles back, huh? One afternoon, after everyone left, we were sitting by the window, folding tablecloths. The light was golden, soft, the kind that makes everything look gentler than it really is. She said, "Mabel, can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Go ahead." "Do you ever regret forgiving him?" I looked out at the sky for a moment. "No, Denise. I regret trusting him too long. But forgiving him, that's what let me breathe again." She swallowed hard. "You know, I thought I was happy with him. But it wasn't love, it was attention. I didn't see what I'd done until everything fell apart." I nodded slow. "That's usually when the truth shows up, after the wreck." She looked down at her hands, whispering, "You ever think God let me go through all this just so I'd end up right here, learning from the woman I hurt?" I smiled a little. "Maybe. God's funny like that. He'll humble you in public, then heal you in private." Her eyes filled up again, and she said, "I don't deserve your kindness." I said, "Ain't none of us earned grace, baby, but we get it anyway." She reached over and touched my hand, just for a second. "Thank you." That touch felt like something breaking and healing at the same time. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Over the next few months, the center grew stronger. More people came. We started a free meal program, and Denise ran the kitchen like she was born for it. Folks loved her cornbread. said it reminded them of home. Sometimes I'd catch her humming that same hymn, His Eye is on the Sparrow, and I'd hum along from my office. It was strange, beautiful even, how two women who once shared the same heartbreak were now building hope together. Then one evening, after closing, she said, "You know, Mabel, I finally found peace here. I think Harold would have wanted that." I looked at her and said softly, "Maybe he did. Maybe this was his way of saying sorry, not through words, but through the people left standing." She smiled, wiped a tear, and said, "You turned pain into a home for others. That's something special." I chuckled. Well, I always told him I'd make something out of nothing. And we both laughed, real, honest laughter, not the nervous kind from before. That night, I locked up the center and stood outside for a while, watching the lights flicker through the windows. The air was cool, the stars bright, and for the first time in years, my heart didn't ache. It was still scarred, sure, but it was steady, because forgiveness hadn't just healed me. It had built a bridge between two broken souls, and that, baby, felt like God's final blessing on the whole messy story. A full year passed faster than I ever thought it could. One whole year since I opened the doors to the Second Chance Center. A year of laughter, tears, shared meals, and stories that stitched broken hearts back together. We decided to celebrate. Nothing fancy, just music, food, and folks coming together. The smell of barbecue floated through the air. Kids ran around outside, and old friends hugged like they hadn't seen each other in decades. I stood by the window for a moment, just watching it all. My heart was full. Everywhere I looked, I saw faces that reminded me why I kept fighting when it would have been easier to give up. Then Darlene came over, holding two plates piled high. "Don't you dare just stand there looking sentimental," she said. "Eat." I laughed. "Girl, I'm soaking this in. Look at all these people. We built something real." She grinned. "You sure did. You turned your heartbreak into hope." Denise walked by with her apron dusted in flour, balancing a tray of pies. "Mabel, we ran out of whipped cream," she said, smiling like she hadn't smiled in years. I chuckled. "Honey, after what we've been through, we don't need whipped cream. We just need peace." Everyone laughed at that, and for a while, the whole room was nothing but joy. Now listen, baby, there's a kind of peace that don't come from money or winning or getting even. It comes from surviving the storm and realizing you didn't just make it, you grew from it. I looked around and saw the women who'd once come in broken, now leading workshops and mentoring others. Men who'd lost jobs were running food drives. Grandmamas who'd been forgotten were teaching cooking classes and making the whole room smell like home. That's when I knew this place wasn't just a building. It was redemption made real. Later that night, after everyone left, I sat alone in the quiet hall. The lights were low. The air still smelled like quiche cobbler and barbecue sauce. I ran my hand along the table, thinking about how far I'd come. 40 years of marriage. A betrayal that nearly broke me. A man who tried to erase me. And yet here I was, standing taller, laughing louder, living freer than I ever did before. Denise came out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "You okay, Mabel?" I nodded. "Yeah, baby. I'm more than okay. I finally understand why all that pain had to happen." She sat beside me. "Why's that?" I smiled. "So we could be sitting here tonight. So we could show folks that broken things can still shine." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "You changed a lot of lives, Mabel." I looked toward the ceiling and whispered, "The Lord changed them. I just opened the door." And I meant that, because everything I'd lost, the house, the marriage, the years, had been traded for something stronger, purpose. But life, baby, it's never done teaching you. Because just when I thought my story was ending, life handed me one more surprise. About a month after that anniversary celebration, I was sitting at my little kitchen table, drinking my morning coffee, when the phone rang. Now, usually, I don't pick up numbers I don't recognize. Too many folks trying to sell something. But that morning, something told me to answer. "Mrs. Mabel Jameson," a woman's voice said. This is her, I replied, half cautious, half curious. This is Angela Turner with the City Council. We've heard about your work with the Second Chance Center, and we'd like to honor you at next month's Community Awards. I blinked, thinking I'd misheard. You mean me? Honor me? She chuckled. Yes, ma'am. You've changed a lot of lives. We think it's time people knew your story. When she hung up, I just sat there staring at the wall. Me? The same woman who'd once been left with nothing but a broken heart and a box of papers, getting honored by the city? Lord! That's how you know God's got a sense of humor. When I told Darlene, she nearly shouted, Girl, you better go buy you a new dress. I laughed. For what? I got my good church shoes and that blue cardigan. That's all the fancy I need. But she wasn't having it. She dragged me to the mall the next week, made me try on dresses till we found one that fit just right. Soft plum color, long sleeves, simple but strong. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Not broken, not bitter, just whole. The night of the ceremony came fast. The hall was packed, lights bright, cameras flashing. I walked up to the stage with my knees trembling like they hadn't done since prom night. When they called my name, I heard the whole crowd clapping. Some of them from the center, some from church, and a few I didn't even know. But then I spotted them, Denise standing right in front, clapping with tears in her eyes, and my son David next to her, smiling proud. The announcer handed me a plaque that said Community Hero for turning pain into purpose. When I took that mic, my hands were shaking, but my voice came out clear. I said, if somebody had told me 5 years ago that I'd be standing here tonight, I'd have laughed through my tears. Back then, I thought my life was over. But the Lord has a way of rebuilding what people try to destroy. I paused, looked right at David and Denise. I learned that forgiveness don't make you weak, it makes you free. And sometimes the best way to win is to keep loving, even when life don't love you back. The room got quiet. Then the applause started. Not loud, but deep. The kind that comes from folks who feel what you said. Afterward, people came up, hugging me, thanking me for inspiring them. One woman whispered, I was about to give up on my marriage till I heard your story. Another said, you gave me courage to start again. I went home that night, took off my shoes, and just sat on the edge of my bed. My plaque lay beside me, shining under the lamp, and I whispered, Thank you, Harold. Thank you, Lord. You turned my heartbreak into somebody else's healing. But baby, before my story truly ended, there was one last visit I never expected, and it came from someone carrying the past in his hands. The morning after that ceremony, I was still smiling to myself, sipping coffee on the porch. The plaque sat in the window catching sunlight, and every time it glimmered, it reminded me that pain really can turn into purpose. Then I saw a car pull up. Old, blue, dusty around the tires. A man stepped out, tall, gray hair under a cap, moving slow like time had weighed on him. At first I didn't recognize him. Then he took off the cap, and I froze. It was Robert, Harold's younger brother. Now listen, baby. I hadn't seen that man since the funeral. And even then, we didn't speak much. He'd always been quiet, kept his distance during all the drama. Morning, Mabel, he said, voice soft. You mind if I come up a minute? I nodded. Sure, Robert. Have a seat. He sat down on the porch rail, hat in hand. For a while, we just listened to the wind move through the trees. Then he said, I was going through Harold's old things last week. Found something he wanted you to have. He pulled a small wooden box from his jacket, scratched up, old, but clean. He handed it to me. My hand started trembling before I even opened it. Inside was a photo, the three of us from years ago, standing in front of the old house when it was first built. I was smiling, Harold's arm around me, and Robert standing beside us, younger, laughing. There was also a note, folded small. I unfolded it slow. Mabel, if this ever reaches you, I hope you're still smiling. I wanted you to know that the best thing I ever did was love you, even if I didn't know how to keep you. Take care of my brother. He never stopped admiring your strength. Harold. I closed my eyes. The wind hit my face, warm and steady, like a quiet touch from somewhere beyond. Robert said, he talked about you right up till the end, you know? Said you were the strongest woman he ever knew. I smiled, though tears blurred my vision. He had a funny way of showing it. Robert chuckled. Yeah, he did. But he knew. Believe me, he knew. We sat there a while longer, just talking about the old days, the cookouts, the church fairs, the time Harold tried to fix the fence and ended up in the ER with a nail in his thumb. For the first time in years, those memories didn't hurt. They just were. Before he left, Robert said, "You built something beautiful, Mabel. He'd be proud of you." I nodded. Maybe, but more than that, I think God's proud. That's what matters. When he drove off, I stayed on that porch holding the box, feeling lighter than I had in a long, long time. That was Harold's last gift to me. Not money, not apologies, but peace. And baby, peace is worth more than any house, any revenge, any sorry that comes too late. As I sat there watching the sunset, I whispered, "We made it, Harold. Both of us, in our own way." But I didn't know that my story still had one more page left to turn. A page I'd been too busy healing to even imagine. A few months passed after Robert's visit. Life at the center kept rolling steady. Classes, potlucks, laughter echoing through the halls every Tuesday and Thursday. The days felt lighter now, softer somehow, like peace had settled in the walls. Then, one morning, I got a letter. No return address, just my name written neat and careful. I opened it, figuring it was another thank you from someone in the community. But when I read the first line, my hands started shaking. Dear Miss Mabel, you don't know me, but my name is Angela Parker. I'm Denise's daughter. I sat back in my chair, heart skipping. My mother told me everything about your husband, the house, the forgiveness you showed her when no one else would. She said you taught her what grace looks like in real life. I wanted to thank you. Tears started rolling before I even reached the end. I've decided to follow in your footsteps. I'm enrolling in social work next semester. I want to help women like my mama, and like you once were, find their second chance. At the bottom, she'd drawn a little heart. Nothing fancy, just pure. I laid that letter flat on the table and covered it with my hand, whispering, Lord, look at you, still turning ashes into blessings. That afternoon, Denise came into the center, humming her usual tune. I handed her the letter. You raised a good girl, I said. She read it, and her hand flew to her mouth. Angela wrote you this? I nodded. She sure did. Looks like that forgiveness thing keeps on working. She laughed through her tears. Guess it does. Later that week, the community held a small luncheon for new volunteers. Young people showed up, some with notebooks, some with shy smiles, ready to learn. One of them stood out. Tall girl, bright eyes, same gentle voice as her mama. Angela. When she saw me, she came right over and hugged me tight. You don't know what this means to me, she said. I smiled. Oh, I think I do. Looking around that room, seeing her beside Denise, seeing my son helping serve food, I realized something deeper than peace. Legacy. Not the kind you write in wills or carve in stone. The kind that grows quietly. Through forgiveness, through second chances, through showing love when the world says you shouldn't. When the event ended, Angela said, One day, I want to open a center just like yours. I touched her cheek and said, You go on and do it, baby. And when you do, name it something that reminds folks that feeling is possible. She smiled. I already got a name in mind, the Third Chance. We both laughed until our sides hurt. As I watched her walk out that day, holding her mama's hand, I thought, this is it. This is the circle closing. All the pain, the loss, the betrayal, it didn't end me. It built a bridge to something better, something that would outlive me. But before I closed that chapter for good, I had one more thing to say to the world that had watched me break, rebuild, and rise. You still with me, baby? Good. Because before I finish this story, I want you to hear me clear. Life don't always break you where you're weak. Sometimes it breaks you where you're strong, just to remind you that strength can bend and still not snap. When Harold walked out that door, I thought my story was over. I thought I'd spend my last years angry, bitter, forgotten. But the Lord had other plans. He let me lose everything so I could find myself. He let me stand in ashes so I'd know how to build again. And when I finally stopped asking why me, I started seeing what for. Now, every morning, when I unlock the doors to the Second Chance Center, I smile. I see the faces of people who once thought they were done: widows, grandmamas, single mamas, old veterans with tired eyes. They come in broken, and they leave lighter. And every time one of them laughs again for the first time, I whisper, "That's what healing sounds like." Sometimes I still think about Harold. Not with hate, not even with sorrow, just peace. He was part of the lesson. He showed me what it costs to love wrong and what it means to forgive right. And Denise, she's still here every week, baking her pies, helping folks fill out forms, hugging strangers like they family. Funny, ain't it? The woman who once took my place now stands beside me, helping others find theirs. That's what grace can do. Our son visits often, brings the grandkids. They call the center Grandma's house. And I let them, because in a way, it is. A house built from heartbreak, but filled with hope. Now listen to me, baby, and don't you forget this part. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means freeing yourself from carrying what's already burned down. You can't grow new flowers while clutching ashes. So if someone ever wronged you and you still carry that weight, I want you to breathe deep right now. Let it go. Not for them, for you. Because when you finally stop watering your pain, your peace will bloom all on its own. That's what I learned. That's what I lived. And that's the story I needed to tell you. Now, if you ever drive past Maple Street and see that old sign that says Second Chance Center, stop by. Come sit for a while. We'll pour you some coffee, tell you a few stories, and remind you that no matter how bad it gets, you can always start again. All right, baby. That's all for now. You take care of yourself. You hear? And remember, Mabel may have lost her house, but she found her home.